Hello, everyone. This is Jimmy Cultist, back again with another logic video. Looks a bit like the subscriber sign has legs, but it does not. Today we are going to be covering the subject of constant variables, or just variables in general. I'm going to be going over the subject. And to start with, we are going to put down a sculpt, put to mirror, grid snap, stamp shape. Just a simple cube will do. It's going to act as a mount for our logic, so that we can easily move this around if we want to. We are going to label this variables. Doesn't really have to look visual. You might want it to stand out though from the rest of your game scenery, so maybe make it glow a little bit or something. It's going to be invisible and non-collidable. We won't have any physics or labels because it's, it's invisible, incorporeal. Only exist as a mount for logic. And now I will introduce you to the subject of today's video. Right here in the yellow category, I forget what they call that. Logic and processing. But that's where it's at if you want to find it. And you can find that in gadgets. But this is a variable. Basically, what a variable does is it holds a value or a number, and depending on what settings you're employing, that number will stay constant even if you leave the level. For example, if you put persist in Dreams on, and then you set the value to 1, it will be at 1 no matter whether you leave the level or not. We're going to set the minimum value to 0, so it can't go below 0. Into the negatives, and we'll set the maximum value to 1 for now, so it can only go to 1, no higher, no lower. But if you are somebody who's interested in making games, you probably already realize what the usage of such a thing could be. It's for storing data. So if you want a door to be open when you leave a level, like say you open a door, then you leave the level and come back, the door normally would be shut because all the logic in the level would be reset. But using a variable, you can have that door open no matter what, just so long as it's triggered. And I guess I could demonstrate real quick what that looks like. Another way it works is with collectibles, so I think I'll make a collectible just to show you what I mean. It'll be like a loving cup or something. We've technically covered this subject before in our exploration game series, but, just in case we wanted to have a separate place, where people could search it up all by itself and not get confused. I do heavily advise people who are new to Dreams to watch the exploration game series, because it has a lot of basic and useful tips for Dreams if you're starting out, so yeah, maybe check that out. But for now, we're going to make this video separate just so it's easier to find. And we're going to need a cube. Let's just go ahead and delete that off of there. Oh, we'll also want this to be non-collidable. Good. And we'll, you know, add a little rotator. Probably want it going a different direction, of course. It's common that objects in games rotate counterclockwise or clockwise, never horizontal. And we'll have to add a little piece of logic to our puppet, of course, to help pick this up. If you're familiar with our other video on, you know, audio logs, some of this logic may look familiar to you. Just going to take out a little trigger zone, set a detect tag, and the tag label will be pickup. And you could put a switch in here, or, you know, a selector or counter. It doesn't matter which you want. Another thing to keep in mind is that variables require to be labeled something or named something. So once you pick a name, that'll be what you got a target for with the variable modifier. I'll show you what that means in a second. And we're going to call this cup. Right here, you'll see a variable modifier. This basically adds values to this. We're going to make the value 1, of course, and the variable name will be cup. Now there are multiple settings here. There's set, which basically will set it to a certain value depending on what you input. There's get, which changes the operating type. I actually don't use get very often, so, you know, not super interesting. Add, which will just add one value continuously to that. So if you have 1 and then you trigger this again, it'll add 2. Whereas set will take the value from whatever it is to 1. So say if your value was 20, it would take it down to 1 upon triggering this variable. Adding is probably the best way to go. I generally use adding. Another one is reset, which will basically just, you know, reset the entire thing by this value, I think. I don't usually use it very often. Actually, maybe set and reset are not the same. I think that's actually, maybe the explanation I gave for set is reset. It doesn't matter though. Honestly, if you're making a simple game, you're just going to want add. Add is the one you want all the time. And there's 2 settings, which is continuous, which will just continuously add this. So it'd be like 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 when it's powered on, as opposed to just 1. If you're used to other continuous settings, such as the, you know, continuous setting on the health modifier, you'll probably understand how that works. Basically just continuously adds 1 at a certain rate, as opposed to adding 1 only once. But we're going to go ahead and put that on here, cup, and we're going to put a destroyer. Actually, we should put the destroyer right here. And the reason why is once this is triggered, this thing will be destroyed. Set this to play once. And we can go ahead and demonstrate how it works. Cup is gone, we picked it up. and the variable is set. So from now on, whether we leave this level through a doorway and we come back, it will still be set to 1 no matter what. It would be difficult to demonstrate this, you know, but just trust me on that. That's how it works. You can actually turn it off if you want to and set it so that it doesn't persist in Dreams, and you may be wondering, well, what's the point of having a variable, you know, that doesn't persist? There are a few usages for it. Sometimes if you're in a certain setting, it can store values, like say if you're collecting points in a mini game, variables can come in handy for that. So, you know, even if it doesn't persist, it's kind of useful to have a stored value within a level, as long as you're there. And then it can be reset when you leave, you know, if you're like, you know, chase the sheep video game or whatever, and then you complete the mini game and leave, and then you can try it again later if you want to and get a new value. So turning it off can sometimes be useful. I would say generally, though, they're most useful for the persistent quality, but, you know. And I'm going to demonstrate a little tip. A little tip I want to talk about real quick. So I'm going to make a doorway. This is a special persistent variable tip. Oh, another thing to keep in mind is that this input, the current value, you know, it can create, you know, it can trigger things. Like, if you have just 1, it could trigger a door to open or something, and that would be fine if you had only 1 door. But you can actually use calculators to cause multiple effects upon activating these things, which I'll demonstrate. Here is a simple doorway. We're going to go ahead and copy this out because we want to. Be sure, though, that if you design something like this, I'll explain a bit. I've got to finish up. Alright. Now, there's going to be an issue where you can't have too many variables. I think you can have like 250 something or 280. I can't remember exactly, but I believe there's information online about the subject, either on in Dreams Me or somewhere. But basically, it's kind of infeasible to have the whole thing where you collect individual coins, and then you know, you'd have to have like so many hundreds of variables connected to each coin in order to have that work. Now, if there's another way to do it, I'm not aware of it. Like if there's some special way that you could fractionally split that and somehow have it carry over, you know, because the thing is there is calculators, but the issue is, what if you collect number 2 coin before you collect number 1? You know, if you have a calculator hooked up, number 1 will disappear, you know, if you collect number 2, and that kind of would be an issue. So I don't know if there's a way to get around that. But most of my collectibles I would have cordoned off, you know, so that you can only... I would either have a separate variable, like cup 1 and cup 2, and I would have them sparse. So basically these are very important, and you can only get to them through very specific scenarios. That way, you know, you're kind of using your variables in an acceptable, you know, way that's a bit more, what is the word? A bit more economic. But I'm going to show you something real quick, which, if you have a mostly linear game, like say some of the older Legend of Zeldas where you go to certain temples in a certain order, you know, to collect objects, you can use a calculator set to greater than 1, we'll say. We'll say this is the door to the Fire Temple, and this is the door to the Water Temple. And we're going to make the grit value greater than 0.1. And I'll show you how this works real quick. Let's take a destroyer. So say you need a key to get into the water temple. Let's make sure this is labeled properly. And we're going to need our maximum value to be higher. We're going to set it to 3. So say this cup here... Oh, wait a minute. We'll need to connect this calculator to the destroyer. Otherwise it'll just, destroy it automatically. Say this cup here, though, opens the water temple gateway. Then you go in the water temple, and you find a new key in there that opens the fire temple gateway. That is, if things trigger the way they're supposed to. It's odd. Doesn't seem to be going up for some reason. Oh, we didn't set it to add. How silly of me. It's gotta be on add. That's one reason why you want to use add. Anyway, opens the gate to the water temple. You go in the water temple, fight a boss, collect a new key. That opens the fire temple. And the genius of this system, which is quite common in adventure games, is that as long as the pathway is linear, you can just add these continuously. Like this variable, it's only one variable, but you could have it count up to thousands of values. So you could just keep doing this with the calculators on up and have a massive game just so long as it's mostly linear. You could still have backtracking for other purposes, but as long as the main progression is like this temple, this temple, this temple in a certain order, and there's no non-linear travel, you could have a potentially gigantic game. Well, there's a limit to how many levels you can have in Dreams, but it could be pretty cool. So hopefully you find that tip useful if you're making a game of that sort. And it would be only one variable, which means you could use these other variables for lots of useful things. You can have up to 200, so you could have like pieces of art or other things, collectibles. Stuff that's common in these kind of games. But hopefully you found that useful. I don't really know if, if there's anything else that people are curious about. I can't really think of anything to do with variables besides this, so let me know in the comments if you have any other requests on the subject, or even a separate subject. This was requested by a viewer a long time ago, but we kind of got busy and it was hard to get to it, so hopefully they're still around and they'll find this useful. That's all. Here are the names of all of our lovely cult supporters. Many thanks to all of you. If you'd like to get your name in those credits, check the link in the description and head over to our Ko-fi. You can become a cultist neophyte to become credited at the end of our video, or you can become an acolyte to gain early access to videos in addition to credit. Now, if you aren't in the mood for membership, you can always leave a one-time tip. If you enjoyed this video and are not already subscribed, consider hitting the subscribe button down below. And maybe give us a quick like, both options are free. Also, don't forget to ring the notification bell so you will always be notified when new videos come out. If you have any thoughts, questions, or suggestions, leave them in the comments section. Or if you just want to let out your pent-up rage, give us some smack talk. Until next time, goodbye.